Hello, Frizzle Faction. In just one word, the Hidden Legacy trilogy is provocative in both senses of the word. Like, this book is both sexy and angering. This is an urban fantasy trilogy, and it takes place in a world where a couple hundred years ago some magic was injected into the population. And now you can be born with magic, and it's a hereditary thing. So of course, this has created an entirely new class structure where the more magic you are, the more well-off you are, the more powerful you are politically, and the more money that you can make. And because magic is hereditary, that means that families that have strong magic running in them are always marrying for political reasons, for convenience, trying to marry other strong magic families in order to keep their posterity in charge and top dogs. Our main character is Nevada Baylor, and she comes from a family that has magic, but is like the lower class magic. And her small talent is that she can detect when people are lying. And honestly, I love this magic system, how it informs the culture of the world and every interaction that people have. But the thing I love about it most is that it perfectly balances the soft, wonderful magic and the hard limitations and rules set. Because in the question of what powers can people get, the answer is pretty much everything. There are people who can summon magical chains, there are people who can befriend wild animals, and there is the more standard magic sets like telekinesis. So in that way, the magic system is pretty soft. But then if you look at it's very predictably hereditary, you can look at people's genes and start predicting it, and also the limitations built into the system. That is when the magic system feels more hard. Because though there isn't any practical limitation to what magic power someone could get, there is the very practical limitation of people only have the ones that they are born with. So while the magic is an important force in the story and how a lot of these battles go down, it never feels too out of control because you always know exactly where people's magical limits are. Not to say that there aren't some surprises, but I do think they're all well earned. The main plot is that Nevada Baylor is the head of a detective agency that she runs with her family, and she is hired to track down this dangerous magic user that is blowing up banks. And this main plot really did give Nevada a chance to shine. I loved following her. She does not take any crap from anyone. She is strong and courageous and also kind and thoughtful. Probably what I loved most about her was how much she loved her family and how that informed so many of her decisions. That she really is the head of a family business, and you can feel that in every interaction with her goofy, wonderful siblings and mother and grandmother and cousins. But of course, the mystery investigation plot isn't what most people are here for the book. As reflected in the absolutely terrible cover, most people are here for the romance. So what did I think of that? Nevada's love interest is Rogan, a very powerful telekinetic with a little bit of telepathy. And this is the part that was provocative, because he is a complete jerk and psychopath. The first time that Nevada and Rogan meet, he kidnaps and tortures her. So as a relationship, you might realize, not really getting off to the best start there. And Rogan over and over crosses the morality line and shows his disregard for other human beings. But also, that's kind of why I loved reading book one. I didn't ship them, but that made this plot of romance between them so entertaining. Because the entire time I was kind of thinking like, maybe they're going to reveal that Rogan is secretly not as bad as everyone thinks he is and it's all been a misunderstanding. And then he'll do something like strangling a woman with her own clothes. And I'm like, oh, that can't really be misread. He really is just that much of a jerk, isn't he? And I'm reading this book in order to root for the romance. And yet, the actions of Rogan over and over made me entirely not ship them, and that balance of both wanting it to work out and hoping that things would change, and also just hoping that Nevada would dump him completely, that was juicy. I was so angry at this book, I was so hooked at this book, I was ready for this. And at the end of book one, when Rogan propositions Nevada and Nevada shuts him down for being a creepy jerk, I was very happy with that ending. And honestly, I didn't like books 2 and 3 because they did go the route of he isn't as bad as she thought after all. And that made everything a little bit more boring, honestly. Part of it was that Rogan got a little bit of character development and stopped being so savage when he was around Nevada. And part of it is that we just got to see the side of Rogan that does care, especially for his lackeys. And so that extra flavor of him really not being a good love interest was kind of dissolved into, well, he's not that actually bad of a love interest. And so I stopped caring so much about the romance, and then they finally got together and I was like, oh, well, that's fine, I guess. And yes, it's a little ridiculous for me to complain about I don't like the romance because he's not a suitable love interest, and then he becomes a suitable love interest and I complain even more. But I'm reading this book for entertainment, not necessarily good love interest role model, you know? And him becoming a better love interest made him less entertaining. But in the end, I really did feel satisfied how this trilogy ended. Mostly because of the way that it sets up the next book in this series, which I'm very excited to read because it has a different protagonist. And nothing against Nevada. She's a fine protagonist, I've got nothing against her, but she reminded me so much in personality to the protagonist of the other series I read by this author, Kate Daniels, and their love interests are also like the same. So I'm really excited to read a book that has a different protagonist because Nevada is very headstrong, stubborn, protective, risk-taking, and the narrator and protagonist of the next books is very detail-oriented, gentle, loving. And I'm really excited to see where these books go with a new voice at the helm. And I also think these books are kind of clever in the way that they explore the theme of your past defines you. Yes, people choose how they act, but you can see so clearly that part of why Rogan, our terrible love interest, is so terrible is because of his upbringing without love and care, is because of his time he served in the military and saw the horrors of war and all those things out there. And part of why Nevada isn't power hungry is because of how she grew up, being nurtured by her family in a very loving environment, and also her having to take the reins and become the head of the family when her father died and run the family business for everyone. And that's where she gets a lot of her protective streak and her pride in her work. And I do love the care that was put into these books to make the people's backstories match their current personalities. I had fun reading these books. They are both better and less sexy than you would assume from the cover art. So don't let that scare you away. I rated these books on average 3.3 stars. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more book review videos on Frizzle Fridays. If you made it to the end of the video, leave a magnifying glass emoji in honor of our Baylor Investigative Agency.